I'm Dr. Michaela Mitchell, and I'm a research scientist at Queensland Museum. I'm a marine biologist, but I'm a very specialised marine biologist. I'm a taxonomist of sea anemones, and that means I identify, name, and describe new species of sea anemones. But I'm also a venomist, and that means I study the venom of sea anemones so that we can use it for very special purposes, like developing medications that we can use to treat diseases.
Hi, I'm Laura Blamey. I'm from the CSIRO and I'm a marine scientist. My research involves trying to better understand how marine ecosystems function, how they're connected, and how they and the resources that they support, or the species that live in them, might be impacted by humans. For example, through fishing or through climate change. So I'm really interested in trying to understand how we can use these ecosystems sustainably and what we might need to do or what we might need to change to ensure that this happens. So one person has asked a question related to the ocean, and this is: how deep can you go in the ocean to find creatures or artifacts? Well, the average depth of the ocean, so if we think about the whole ocean and look at the average depth, that's about 3,500 meters for that average depth. Of course, there are places much shallower than this and places that are deeper.
We know that the deepest trench in the ocean is around 11 kilometres down, and it's called the Mariana Trench.
And this is in the Western Pacific. However, much of the sunlight only penetrates down to the first about 200 meters of the ocean. So there's only light in the first sort of 200 meters, and this enables photosynthesis to occur in this region. Deeper than that, there's not much light that goes down. So these first 200 meters are known as the euphotic zone, and this is where the majority of commercial fisheries take place, and most of the marine animals that we're familiar with occur in this zone. Of course, though, there are living creatures that occur much deeper than this, and many of them have adapted or evolved different ways to be able to survive in the darkness.
I've worked on sea anemones that come from around 5 to 6 kilometres down, and they're quite different in appearance to the ones that we find along the shoreline. They're really evolved to be specialised to deal with really great pressures under the ocean and a lack of light. And it's a bit hard to find your prey when you're down there, so they've all developed specialised ways.
If we think of humans going into the ocean and exploring the ocean, the record for humans going on scuba diving is a little over 300 meters, but very few people dive to these depths. People who are doing scuba diving are usually diving much shallower than this, and this is because it isn't safe to go down to depths like this. When you do go to depths, sort of very deep depths, we get nitrogen gas, which dissolves into the tissues and into the blood in our body. And on the way back up to the surface, this gas then gets turned into little tiny bubbles that are really painful, and they can be harmful as well in our tissues and blood. However, we have managed to explore the ocean at greater depths through the use of technology, and you get what are called remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, and these can go down to depths of, I'd say, about 6,000 meters, maybe a little deeper, and they're kitted out with, all these different gadgets. They've got video equipment, they've got different sensors, lights, equipment to detect water chemistry. And so they're able to collect information from these deep regions for us and help us explore these different depths that humans are just not able to go to. So we're still learning a vast amount about the deep ocean. There's lots that we don't know, and there's lots of exploration that does take place. And with the use of technology, we're able to go to much deeper depths and collect this information.
One person has asked, are there saltwater and freshwater fish? Yes, there are. Fish live in both types of environments. They both look the same. They have fins and gills and scales. The main difference is, if you were to take a saltwater fish and put it into freshwater, they wouldn't survive, and a freshwater fish wouldn't survive in the saltwater environment.
Now, there are many differences between these two environments, but the main difference is the concentration or the amount of salt that you find in the water. So fish that live in freshwater, they've been adapted to be able to regulate and keep salts within their body because the water around them is low in salt. While those that live in the sea are living in an environment or a water body that's got a high salt concentration. And so they've adapted their bodies to be able to regulate this by taking in the seed water and then excreting most of those salts out back into the water again.
But as usual, in nature, there's always an exception to the rule. There are some fish that live in the mouths of rivers that will go out to the open ocean to reproduce and make the next generation of fish. There are also some fish that live in the ocean that will come into the freshwater river mouth to reproduce there.
So you might have heard of salmon before. Now, this is a really well-known example of a fish that can survive in both freshwater and saltwater. When they're born, they're actually born in freshwater and they migrate all the way down to the sea and they spend most of their lives in the sea. But when it's time for them to spawn or lay their eggs again, they travel all the way back up rivers and they'll lay their eggs and so the cycle will continue. Now, these types of fish are called anadromous fish, but you also get catadromous fish. Now, catadromous fish just do it in reverse. Instead, they are born in the sea and they then travel up rivers and spend most of their lives in freshwater. And when it's time for them to breed or lay their eggs again, they'll travel all the way back to the environment where they were born and lay their eggs, and so the cycle continues.
One person has asked, with a tree's DNA, can we create a tree that can use saltwater and freshwater to survive? Well, nature is so amazing, we don't actually need to create a tree that can do that. We already have trees that actually do that, and they're called mangroves. You'll see mangroves growing at the mouths of rivers where they meet the ocean. So these trees can actually cope with a lot of freshwater and saltwater, and they have different mechanisms for being able to get rid of the salt throughout their system. Some of them can take the salt that they draw up through their roots and get rid of it by releasing it through their leaves. So when you look at their leaves, they'll have a layer of salty crystals on there. And so then when it rains, it washes that salt off. And so the process keeps going. But there's lots of different species and they've all developed different ways of tolerating the extreme environment that they live in, which can be salty for half of the day and then all fresh water for the next day. And of course, they need to be able to tolerate rain as well.